So shall we start? Yeah. So we are in Book 5, the Book of Love, Canto 2, which has the title simply Shraddhavan. Canto 1 was giving us an introduction to this book with a description of the destined meeting place, the area where Savitri and Shraddhavan would meet, and then what we read from the beginning of this Canto 2, Savitri remembering that scene, where it was exactly, the road running along the edge of the forest, and a single little path leading into the green. Here first she met on the uncertain earth the one for whom her heart had come so far. So now we get a description, the first description of Shraddhavan, as she sees him and as he is. As might a soul on nature's background limbed stand out for a moment in a house of dream created by the ardent breath of life, so he appeared against the forest verge, inset twixt green relief and golden ray, as if a weapon of the living light, erect and lofty like a spear of God, his figure led the splendor of the morn. Noble and clear as the broad, peaceful heavens, a tablet of young wisdom was his brow. Freedom's imperious beauty curved his limbs. The joy of life was on his open face. His look was a wide daybreak of the gods. His head was a youthful rishi's touched with light. His body was a lover's and a king's. In the magnificent dawning of his force, built like a moving statue of delight, he illumined the border of the forest page. Out of the ignorant, eager toil of the years, abandoning man's loud drama, he had come, led by the wisdom of an adverse fate, to meet the ancient mother in her groves. In her divine communion he had grown, a foster child of beauty and solitude, heir to the centuries of the lonely wise, a brother of the sunshine and the sky, a wanderer communing with depth and march, a Veda knower of the unwritten book, perusing the mystic scripture of her forms. He had caught her hierophant significances, her sphered, immense imaginations learned, taught by sublimities of stream and wood, and voices of the sun and star and flame, and chant of the magic singers on the boughs, and the dumb teaching of four-footed things, helping with confident steps her slow great hands. He leaned to her influence like a flower to rain, and like the flower and tree and natural growth, widened with the touches of her shaping hours. The mastery free natures have was his, and their ascent to joy and spacious calm. One with the single spirit inhabiting all, he laid experience at the Godhead's feet. His mind was open to her infinite mind. His acts were rhythmic with her primal force. He had subdued his mortal thought to hers. That day he had turned from his accustomed paths. For one who, knowing every moment's load, can move in all our studied or careless steps, had laid the spell of destiny on his feet and drawn him to the forest's flowering verge. You will begin, Dhanalakshmi.
As might a soul on nature's background claimed, stand out for a moment in a house of dream, created by the ardent breath of life. So he appeared against the forest verge, inset twixt green lily and golden ray.
So this is the one for whom Savitri's heart has come so far. And she remembers him standing out for a moment against the edge of the forest, as if he's inset between that green relief and the golden ray that's shining down. So it's as if he might be a soul who has been outlined against the background of nature. Limbed means drawn with a line, outlined. So in a kind of, in a moment of vision, such a figure might stand out against the background of nature, might stand out for a moment in a house of dream, in some kind of dreamy state, or in an actual dream or a vision. One might see a soul standing out against the background of nature. This house of dream created by the ardent breath of life. It's given life and existence. So he appeared against the forest verge, inset. He's been put there, set between the green background of the trees and the golden sunlight.
insert. It is not
Insert. No, it's inset. We have these sculptures on the walls of temples. No, there's a background, no, and then the figure of the deity is set there in that setting.
As if a weapon of the living life, erect and lofty, like a spear.
Spear, yeah.
Of God. His figure lacks the splendor of the morning.
So the sunlight is shining on him, no? And he looks like a weapon, a spear, an upright spear, a weapon of light, of the living light, standing up straight, tall, like a spear of God. And it's as if, because it's sort of standing out, highlighted, his figure, this figure is as if leading all the beauty and the splendor of the morning. He's as if in the forefront. Gumsun, my dear.
Noble and clear as the broad peaceful heavens, a color of young wisdom was his brow. Brilliance, imperious beauty curved his lips. The joy of life was on his open face.
So now he starts to describe him. So the brow, Sri Aurobindo often describes the brow first. No? This is noble and clear, like the sky, like broad, peaceful heavens, cloudless heavens. No? And he says this brow is like a tablet of young wisdom. Although he's a young person, there seems to be something wise and noble about his appearance. And we see his whole body, that this is not somebody stiff and formal. It's the beauty of freedom which curves his limbs. He's been brought up freely in the forest. And there's something very compelling about this beauty of his body. His face is open, it's got an open expression, full of the joy of life. Chief. Yeah?
His look was a wide daybreak of the gods. His head was a youthful Rishi's touch with light. His body was a lover's American.
Thank you. And that look that he's giving out onto the world, it's like a daybreak, a bright morning of the gods. Sometimes we see young people who have this very, very fresh and open look on their face, no? And the shape of his head, it's like that of a youthful rishi, of the feeling he's going to become a rishi. And it's touched with light, as if there's light shining around him. But his body is strong and handsome, the body of a lover and a king. After all, he is a prince. Oh, he's going to be a king. Joel.
In the magnificent dawning of his force, built like a moving statue of delight, he illumined the border of the forest page.
So the dawning of his force. He's a young man, he's at the beginning of his full strength, no? Magnificent. And he's built there like a statue of delight, but a moving, living statue. So he stands there illumining the border of the forest page. This is an image from the old medieval manuscripts where they would take an initial letter and decorate it with a beautiful picture. So, or in the margin of the page, there might be a beautiful picture, done in brilliant colors and gold, while the main text is just in black. So he's shining out of the page of the forest like an illumined letter. Mahalingam.
Out of the ignorant, eager child of the year, abandoning man's loud drama, he had come, led by the wisdom of an adverse fate, to meet the ancient mother in the grove.
So he was not born in the forest, he was born in the palace, in the capital city, but he has come away from all that. He's come away from the ignorant, eager labor, the toil of human time, of the years. He's come abandoning man's loud drama, all the drama of human life. He has come to meet the ancient mother in her groves, the earth goddess, the ancient mother in these her beautiful forests. No? And this has come about by the wisdom of an adverse fate. When your father gets banished loses his eyesight, gets banished from his kingdom, that seems like a very bad thing to happen, an adverse fate. But Shraddhavan has benefited from that adverse fate. It has brought him into this, into the communion with nature, and well, we will see. It seems adverse, no? Justin?
In the divine communion he had grown, a foster child of beauty and solitude, heir to the centuries of the long, lonely wilds, brother to the sunshine in the sky, wanderer communing with death and life.
So in communion with the mother, with the earth mother, he has grown as her foster child. Now, a foster child is a child who has been adopted by somebody other than his birth parents. So he's been adopted by this beauty of the forest, the loneliness, and he has become an heir. He's inherited the centuries of the lonely wise, all the wise people, the sages and rishis who've inhabited those lonely places. He has received or inherited all their wisdom. And he's close to nature, a brother of the sunshine and the sky. And he wanders here and there freely in the forest, communing, having an exchange of consciousness with depth and marge, the very depths of the forest and the edges, or the edges maybe of the streams as well. So Amal Kiran has written a very interesting comment on this line, but just now it's not coming to my mind what he has said about it. Martin.
The Veda law of the unwritten book, they're using the mystic scripture of her forms, he had caught her hierophant significances, her seared immense imagination firm, taught by sublimities of stream and wood, and voices of the sun and star and flame, and chant of the magic singers on the boughs, and the dumb teaching of four-footed things.
So this has been his education. He's a knower of the Vedas, not perhaps the written Vedas. He knows the knowledge of the unwritten book of nature. He's been reading this mystic scripture of all the forms of nature, and he's been able to understand these secret significances. A hierophant is an initiate, a priest, somebody who has the secret knowledge. So he has been able to gather the secret knowledge of nature. He has learned her sphered, immense imaginations. A sphere, of course, we talk about the heavenly spheres. Immense means huge. So these imaginations of nature, which are on such a vast scale, perhaps he's not been communing only with this forest where he lives, but also with the skies looking out into the universe. And he's been taught by the sublime quality of natural things, like streams and woods. No? And he's been taught by the voices of the sun, the stars, the flame of altar and kitchen, we could get mentioned later on. And the chant, that chanting of the magic singers on the boughs, all the birds, and the dumb teaching of four-footed things. So one can learn so much, perhaps, if one is really absorbed in nature and observing, open to all the things that can be learned in that way. Sergei?
Helping with confident steps the slow great plants, willing to take influence like a flower of rain, and like the flower and tree, the natural growth, widen with the touches of the shape of hours.
So he's moving forward with confident steps, and in this way he is helping her hands, the hands of the ancient mother. He's collaborating with her, and he's leaning to her influence in the same way that a flower leans out to receive the rain. No? So he is a natural growth like the flower and the tree, and as the touches of nature help him to widen, to grow wider in consciousness and in sympathy with everything that's around. So the hours spent in nature help him to grow.
The mastery three natures have was his, and there ascent a joy and specialist calm, one with a single spirit inhabiting all. He laid experience at the Godhead's feet. His mind was open to her infinite mind. His acts were written with her primal force. He had
Subdued.
his mortal soul to hers.
The mastery free natures have was his. People who have never had to be inhibited by social conventions and moralities have a certain mastery. And they also say yes to joy and to calm, to spacious calm, wide calm, open. This is part of his nature. And he's in harmony with that single spirit, which is inhabiting everything there, and it's as if he's living his life, or all the experiences of his life, as a kind of sacrifice at the feet of the Godhead, the ancient mother. So his mind is open to the mind of nature, her infinite mind. And what he does, his actions, are in harmony with the rhythms of her force, her primal force, that original force before the mind comes in. He had subdued, he'd surrendered his mortal thought to hers, to this infinite mind of the Earth Mother. Suresh?
The depth he had turned from his accustomed work, for one who, knowing very moments ago, can move in all over steady careless steps, had laid the spell of Disney on his feet and drawn him to the forest flowing wedge.
So that day he wasn't going his usual paths. Every day he would go into the forest and collect fruit and wood and water and these things for his parents. But that day he turned away from his usual paths, accustomed paths. And this had happened because of some guidance, some intervention. There is one who knows the significance of every moment and it can move in everything that we do, all our steps, whether they are steps that we have studied about and thought carefully about and decided, or whether they are steps that we just take carelessly without thinking about it. That one can act through all those things that we do. So that one had laid the spell of destiny on his feet and told them which way to go and led him to this lovely flowering verge of the forest, just so that he could be there at the right moment when Savitri was passing. So let's read on, Nana Lakshmi.
At first, her glance that took life's million shapes, impartially to people its treasure house, along its sky and flower and hill and star, dwelt rather on the bright harmonious scene.
So as she's driving along in her chariot, she's looking around. Now her glance, her look is taking in everything, all these million shapes of life, and she's taking it all in impartially into the treasure house of her consciousness, along with sky and flower and hill and star, all this, whatever shapes of living creatures she sees. It's all part of the scenery. And so now when she looks, that's what her glance is looking at. It's dwelling rather on this bright, harmonious scene, what we read about last time. But then, fortunately, yes, go on.
It saw the green gold of such numberless war. The crosses quivering with a slow winging street.
Tread.
The branches haunted by the wild bird's call.
Yes, so this is what was foremost to the eyes. This green and gold of the grass, sleeping grasses, the grasses quivering with the slow wind's tread, the little breeze, and those lovely branches and the sound of the birds. Yeah. The sward, it actually means a lawn. You know, if the short grass, and then the longer grasses are moving in the wind. Yes, Gunsun.
Awake to nature, baby as yet to life, the eager prisoner from the infinite, the immortal wrestler in this mortal house, his pride, power, passion over striving God.
Yes.
It's so this image of veiled deity,
Deity.
this thinking master, creature of the earth, this last result of the beauty of the stars, for only so like a pair and common forms. The artist's spirit needs not for its work, and puts aside in memory's shadowy rooms.
Thank you. So her glance is awake to nature, and it's not so focused on life. It's vague as yet to life. That is not what is interesting it. And life is this eager prisoner from the infinite. Life here is a prisoner in the forms of matter. It has come from the infinite. Here, living in this mortal house, it's a wrestler, an immortal wrestler, the life spirit, with its pride and power and passion of a striving God. There's something restless about the life spirit in us, no? So her glance is vague to all that. It sees this figure standing there, this image of veiled deity. She sees a human being, this thinking master creature of the earth. The human form, the human being, is a last result of the beauty of the stars. No? We are a product of all this labor of the stars. But her glance at first only sees this figure standing there like beautiful but ordinary forms that the artist's spirit, the consciousness within, doesn't need for its work, and it just puts it aside in memory's shadowy rooms. She's not struck first by the creature, the person standing there. This doesn't strike her at first.
A look that turns aside our imposed fate, thus in the hour most concerned of all, wandering unmarked by slow surface mind, the heedless heart beneath her panting lips, admired indifferent beauty and cared not to wake her body spirit to its king.
So he's bringing some tension into this scene, you know, that so just a look, a turn, decides our fate. It's ill-poised, it's unbalanced. Is it going to go this way, or is it going to go that way? So this is the moment, this is the hour which most concerned everything for her. But the consciousness within is wandering, unwarned by the slow surface mind. The surface mind is not responding very quickly. The heedless scout beneath her tenting lids, within her eyes, there's a conscious spirit, but he's not paying attention. He's supposed to be the scout on the lookout, no? But in this moment, he's not paying attention. So it only admires this beauty, this indifferent beauty, this beauty that doesn't have any great significance for her. And it doesn't take the trouble to wake up the spirit in her body to the presence of its king, the Lord that she's actually been looking for. Joanne?
So might she have passed by on chance, ignoring clothes, missing the call of heaven, losing life's aim, but the God touched in time her conscious soul.
One more line.
Her vision settled, cold, and all was changed.
So just in time. She might have just passed by without missing that special moment and missing the aim of life. Perhaps these things happen sometime. But just in time, the God touched her conscious soul, and her vision focuses, settles, caught on this image, and everything's changed. Yes?
Her mind at first dwelt in ideal dreams, those intimate transmitters of the earth's sign that make known things a hint of unseen sphere, and saw in him the gear of the spot, a symbol figure standing mid earth's scenes, a king of life outlined in delicate air.
Thank you. So, the first reaction, she sees her mind is anyway dwelling, living in these ideal dreams, which turn the physical signs of earth, it transmutes them into something with a deeper significance. The ideal dreams make known things a hint, an indication of unseen spheres, of subtler worlds. So her mind sees him at first as the genius of the spot. This is a translation of a Latin term, genius loci, the spirit of the location, of the space. The ancients believed that every spot, every place has a spirit. So she sees him as an embodiment of the spirit of that place. A symbol figure standing here in the midst of these scenes of the earth. A king of life outlined in delicate air. A spirit, something not physical. Yes, Mahalingam. So he read, sorry, Justin, yes.
Yet, this was but a moment's thread. For suddenly her heart looked out at him, the passion seeing used thought cannot match. A new one nearer than its own close strings.
So that's just for a moment, a little dreamy moment, that she sees him like that as the genius of the spot. For suddenly her heart looked out at him. It wakes up, and the heart has its own kind of seeing, a seeing that thought can't match, its own kind of intuition and knowledge. And immediately the heart recognizes him, new one, nearer than its own close strings. The idea of the heart strings, the heart as an instrument that can be played on like music, but also the strings of attachment to all the things around, or that holds the being together, the heart strings. something closer and more intimate even than the very heartstrings themselves.
All in movement for surprise and cease. All in inconscient ecstasy lay enwrapped, or under imagination's colored lids, held up in a large mirror of dream, broke forth in flame to recreate the world, and in that flame to new things she was born.
So there's that moment of recognition, and the whole being is surprised and seized. Everything that had lain wrapped up within her in inconscient ecstasy, kind of bliss that's within her that she's not even aware of. And everything that the eye of imagination might have held up to the mind, all this breaks out in flame and recreates the world, changes everything for her. It's a kind of new birth. She wakes up, everything is changed. In that flame, to new things she was born. Sergei.
A mystic tumult from her depths arose, hailed, smitten, erect like one who dreams at ease, lying back to gaze from every gate of sense. Thoughts, indistinct and led in moon-mist heavens, feelings as when a universe takes birth, swept through a turmoil of your bosoms space, invaded by a swarm of golden gods, arising to a hymn of wondrous priests. Her soul flung wide its doors to this new sun.
So, a mystic tumult. A tumult is a noise, a disturbance, an upheaval coming up from the very depths of her being. And the life force in her is hailed. It's as if something gets hold of it and drags it, and it's pulled erect, upright, so as if it had been dreaming at ease, and somebody comes and shakes it and makes it stand up. Life ran to gaze from every gate of sense, the eyes, the ears, all the 6 gates of the senses. And thoughts come, indistinct, happy thoughts in moon mist heavens, vague, wonderful, magical thoughts, feelings as when a universe takes birth, the Big Bang, boom, everything wakes up. All this sweeps through the turmoil, the disturbance of her bosom, her heart, which is being invaded by a swarm of golden gods, a swarm of bees, many, many, many golden gods pouring in there. And her soul wakes up. Her soul is woken up by this hymn of the priests of wonder, expressing wonder. Her soul flung wide its doors to this new sun. This will be the center of her universe from now on.
An alchemy worked, the transmutation came, the mission phase that wrote the master's spell.
You can read the next sentence as well, Bhavan.
And the nameless light of 2 approaching eyes, a swift and futile fate, turning of her days, appeared and stretched to a plane of unknown worlds.
Thank you. Alchemy. The aim of alchemy was to turn everything to gold, to be able to turn base metals to gold. So that's what happens. Everything's turned to gold. This transmutation. Everything is changed. That missioned face, Shraddhavan's face, has worked the magic that the master intended. So she doesn't, this light that comes to her from his eyes doesn't have a name, but she understands that this is the fated turning of her days. And this is a turning in her life, the turning point, and the road stretches out in front to a gleam of unknown worlds. She doesn't know what lies in front, but anyway, this is the doorway to it. Suresh.
Then, trembling with the mystic shock her heart, moved in her breast, and cried out like a bird who hears his mad above neighboring bird.
Yes. So her heart is trembling with the shock, and it's as if it moves, and a cry comes out. She makes a sound like a bird, spontaneously. The bird who hears his mate on a neighboring branch will spontaneously answer in that way. Her heart answers, and she makes a sound. And she stops the horses, hooves trampling fast, wheels largely stumbling, ceased. The chariot stood like an arrested wind. Now she's been moving fast, but everything stops. She puts on the brakes. So that's where we'll stop for today. So shall we read this? We go back to page 393. See if we can read these 2 pages, 2.5 pages. As might a soul on nature's background limned stand out for a moment in a house of dream, created by the ardent breath of life, so he appeared against the forest verge, inset twixt green relief and golden ray. As if a weapon of the living light, erect and lofty like a spear of God, his figure led the splendor of the morn. Noble and clear as the broad, peaceful heavens, a tablet of young wisdom was his brow. Freedom's imperious beauty curved his limbs. The joy of life was on his open face. His look was a wide daybreak of the gods. His head was a youthful rishi's, touched with light. His body was a lover's and a king's. In the magnificent dawning of his force, built like a moving statue of delight, he illumined the border of the forest page. Out of the ignorant, eager toil of the years, abandoning man's loud drama, he had come, led by the wisdom of an adverse fate, to meet the ancient mother in her groves. In her divine communion, he had grown a foster child of beauty and solitude, heir to the centuries of the lonely wise, a brother of the sunshine and the sky, a wanderer communing with depth and marge, a Veda knower of the unwritten book, perusing the mystic scripture of her forms, he had caught her hierophant significances, her sphered immense imaginations learned, taught by sublimities of stream and wood, and voices of the sun and star and flame, and chant of the magic singers on the boughs, and the dumb teaching of four-footed things, helping with confident steps her slow great hands. He leaned to her influence like a flower to rain, and like the flower and tree and natural growth, widened with the touches of her shaping hours. The mastery free natures have was his, and their ascent to joy and spacious calm. One with the single spirit inhabiting all, he laid experience at the Godhead's feet. His mind was open to her infinite mind. His acts were rhythmic with her primal force. He had subdued his mortal thought to hers. That day he had turned from his accustomed paths. For one who, knowing every moment's load, can move in all our studied or careless steps, had laid the spell of destiny on his feet and drawn him to the forest's flowering verge. At first, her glance that took life's million shapes impartially to people its treasure house, along with sky and flower and hill and star, dwelt rather on the bright, harmonious scene. It saw the green gold of the slumberous sward, the grasses quivering with the slow wind's tread, the branches haunted by the wild bird's call. awake to nature, vague as yet to life, the eager prisoner from the infinite, the immortal wrestler in its mortal house, its pride, power, passion of a striving God. It saw this image of veiled deity, this thinking master creature of the earth, this last result of the beauty of the stars, but only saw, like fair and common forms, the artist's spirit needs not for its work, and puts aside in memory's shadowy rooms. A look, a turn decides our ill-poised fate. Thus, in the hour that most concerned her all, wandering unwarned by the slow surface mind, the heedless scout beneath her tenting lids admired indifferent beauty, and cared not to wake her body's spirit to its king. So might she have passed by on chance ignorant roads, missing the call of heaven, losing life's aim. But the God touched in time her conscious soul. Her vision settled, caught, and all was changed. Her mind at first dwelt in ideal dreams, those intimate transmuters of earth's signs that make known things, a hint of unseen spheres, and saw in him the genius of the spot, a symbol figure standing mid earth's scenes, a king of life outlined in delicate air. Yet this was but a moment's reverie, for suddenly her heart looked out at him. The passionate seeing used, thought cannot match, and knew one nearer than its own close strings. All in a moment was surprised and seized, all in inconscient ecstasy lain wrapped, or under imagination's coloured lids, held up in a large mirror air of dream, broke forth in flame to recreate the world, and in that flame to new things she was born. A mystic tumult from her depths arose, hailed, smitten erect like one who dreamed at ease. Life ran to gaze from every gate of sense. Thoughts indistinct and glad in moon-mist heavens, feelings as when a universe takes birth, swept through the turmoil of her bosom's space, invaded by a swarm of golden gods, arising to a hymn of wonders priests, worlds. Her soul flung wide its doors to this new sun. An alchemy worked, the transmutation came. The missioned face had wrought the master's spell. In the nameless light of two approaching eyes, a swift and fated turning of her days appeared and stretched to a gleam of unknown worlds. Then, trembling with the mystic shock, her heart moved in her breast and cried out like a bird who hears his mate upon a neighboring bough. Hooves trampling fast, wheels largely stumbling, ceased. The chariot stood like an arrested wind.